All right.
Yeah, I see that we're live.
Now, Amar, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. You can hear me. I do not hear you. All right. Hold on a second. So, folks, can you give me a 1 if you can hear me? Would you please give me a 1 if you can hear me? I am not hearing Amar. Now, don't say anything yet, Amar. I just want to see if people can hear me. You can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Way.
What? I don't see any comments coming through.
What is going on, man? Hold on just a second.
All right, so people can hear you. Can they hear me?
All right.
Number 2, if you can hear me.
All right, hold on a second. All right, so they can hear me. All right, Mar, say a couple things.
Yeah, I mean, Scott says he
Scott,
can hear me.
Scott, you're saying, whoa. Scott, are you saying you can hear me too? So you can't hear me?
No, they can hear me.
No, not you. I'm talking to these guys.
But so you can hear me.
All right. You're fine. You can hear Amar. All right, so yeah, Scott Jones says he can hear. I can hear both. That's nuts. You can hear Amar. All right, Mar, say something.
Hi.
All right, now I can hear you.
Scott Jones says he can hear.
All right. I don't know what that was about.
I can hear both. That's nuts. You can hear Amar.
All right, hold on a sec.
All right, Mar, say something.
All right, there we go. All right, gotcha. What are you laughing at?
I don't know. I just think it's funny because we're like, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Feel like the Verizon commercial.
You know what I
Remember
think
that guy? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Unfortunately, I think what happened was I had it on my volume turned down. I was trying to interview a guy who I've been wanting to interview for a long, long time. I couldn't hear a damn thing he said. And I was like, I just can't. And then I was like, was my volume turned down? Yeah, it's this comedy hour. Yeah, right, man. Oh, yeah. So I guess I don't know why I went down because I was hearing Amar just fine, everybody. We were talking, and then Amar was telling about the well he had dug so that he could have a rainwater catch in San Diego. And then and then all of a sudden it just cut out. I didn't change the thing or anything. It just went out. I was like, what the heck happened? So that was kind of weird. But here we are. So we are live and in person. Hold on just a second. And just real quick, so Amar was telling me about his gardening, and he's got some trees going up and everything. That's fantastic, man. That's awesome. So good stuff, Amar. San Diego, man, I tell you, I'll never step inside California, but, man, feel free to send me some freshly grown citrus plants or citrus fruits, if you would. Man.
You mean avocado?
Well, I don't like avocado, but you know what I'm eating right now? Some pistachios. Oh, yeah. Man. All right.
Out here, too.
Want to put your screen up there? Your disclosure.
Yeah, let me see if this can do correctly here.
So just remember, guys, sometimes it is user error, and it just happens to be in this case my user error, I think. But it was my fault. It was my fault because we were talking and it just shut out. So
yeah. So what we're gonna do today is so we started with. Our first episode or first iteration of this was the documents within an estate plan that benefit you in terms of healthcare directives and power of attorney. Then we went into the will and trust. And now we're going to assume once you pass on, what happens to an irrevocable trust and what happens to setting up those for specific situations. If you're charitably inclined, and then also, with the Secure Act, we eliminated the stretch provisions within the IRA. And so now, is there a way, if you're charitably inclined, to still get some type of stretch out of an IRA? And the answer is yes, and we're going to go over that.
I'm going to sit outside, Amar. If you're wondering what I'm doing, it's a nice day here, so I'm going to enjoy some of the nice weather until, come on, Pablo. All right, go ahead.
And again, everything we talk about is educational purposes only. We haven't taken your present situation into account. What else do we have to say? We're not attorneys. We're not CPAs.
Seek your own counsel.
Seek your own counsel. Yeah, there we go.
Look at that.
So
guy.
I'm just gonna hop in here. What do you think, Josh? Should we just get into it? Anything else to add?
No, man. I think it's all good. Let's run. And then, of course, by all means, if you ask questions, we'll get to them throughout the presentation. We'll get to them afterwards, and then we'll open it up for the floor for other stuff that I want to talk about too. All right, you got a hard stop, Amar? Or what's your okay? Yeah. So we got an hour.
An hour, yeah.
Okay, good. Because I do want to talk some other things too that I did a video on yesterday. I'd like to see what your thoughts are. So let's roll, man. Let's roll.
Let's go through this. So again, a trust is just think of it as an account or ownership where you title assets in, and it's like a chassis for your assets to transfer. On an irrevocable trust, the difference is once the assets are in that chassis, you cannot change the terms of an irrevocable trust. It's irrevocable, right? Certain states allow for decanting, but we're not going to go over get into that. So it's basically what the word says: irrevocable. You cannot change it. You cannot terminate it.
Can't be changed. It's literally that simple.
There are a couple of tax advantages on an irrevocable trust in the sense that if you have assets that are growing, you can transfer that growth or freeze that value of that asset in your estate and have the growth go into your beneficiary's estate, right? So the whole point of irrevocable trust is to transfer kind of balance sheet items and growth items onto the next generation or other individuals.
That's a huge deal, folks. I just go into that a little bit deeper, Amar. I think a lot of people don't quite get the benefit of that, frankly. If you want to dive in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so when we're pushing up against estate tax exemption amounts, and you want to make sure that your estate is not subject to estate taxes, then the use of irrevocable trust is really to take assets that are going to continue to grow, but transfer the ownership into your children.
Exactly.
And so that growth still happens, but it's on their side of the balance sheet. And so typically you'll be filing a 709 gift tax form because these are larger transfers. They're more than the $15,000 per year. But you're really trying to make sure that your estate doesn't continue to grow within your balance sheet, but it grows on your next generation. I think that's the best way to put it. Now,
let me just real quick. The reason I want to point that out too, and right now, it seems like Joe Biden isn't going to revisit reducing the estate tax exemption, but it will come back at some point, and you still have your state estate tax in some of your states as well. However, a lot of people, Amar, and I know you can attest this too, say, "Oh, I only have a couple $1 million. I'm not worried about it." I'm like, dude, you're 55 years old. You know what I'm saying? By the time you're 85 years old, that's 30 years of growth. We'll just say you got $2 million. If you doubled it, you get 7.2%. That's going to be $4 million by the time you're 60, $8 million by the time you're 70, and whatever that is, $16 million by the time you're 80. And again, I mean, this is all simple stuff, I grant you, but just because you don't have it now doesn't mean you might not have it in the future. And if you live in a state like Massachusetts or all these other states, Oregon, I think, you get crunched, man, big time.
Yeah. Yeah, and
this. Carl says, "Thanks for having Amar here, Josh." Amar, did you pay Carl to say that?
Yeah, I give him his $5 here in a second. But this is a way, like there's family limited partnerships where you can gift shares of a corporation to children and so forth into these irrevocable trusts. The one thing that I want to go and once you put assets in these trusts, you no longer control these assets, and so in most instances, you're going to be one step removed from those assets. Yep. And then also for your children, or assuming that this is you're giving your assets to your children. It also can protect them from creditors. We used to say, at USA, we used to say creditors, predators, in-laws, and outlaws.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because most of the time they're going to be one step removed as well. They're just going to be the income beneficiary of that irrevocable trust. Now, there's two ways to fund the trust in terms of tax liabilities, right? So in one way, you could do an irrevocable trust where then the trust will have to pay the taxes on assets, which typically for most people is the right way. But if you have significant assets, you may want to create what's called an effectively, or it's called a defective trust, and meaning that the grantors of that trust pay all the taxes. So essentially, you're able to gift more because you're paying the taxes, which is not considered a gift, right? So that is part of the planning piece of that. So the disadvantages, I think, a big one that we talked about earlier is just loss of control, right? The second thing is there's rigid terms of an irrevocable trust, right? Like once you create those terms, you're not going to be able to change them later on. And so terms of a trust can be a percentage of assets in terms of distribution, could be so there's non-discretionary and discretionary. Non-discretionary is basically, it's set in stone. So it's 12/31, you get your balance. It's 5% of whatever that balance is. And that's what's distributed either on a monthly, quarterly basis, what have you. And then you can have discretionary where you can have a trustee in place, and that trustee will use HEMS powers plus whatever they deem necessary for the beneficiary, right? And so then you can be one step removed from that trust.
So, but you're going to have to tell people what HEMS powers is, Amar.
Yeah, so HEMS is health, education, maintenance, and support. There's the basic necessities in the sense of taking additional principal out of an irrevocable trust. With those provisions, you pretty much can get access to what you need or what your beneficiaries would need.
That's very liberal, by the way. I mean, it's if you die and if you had granted, if you set up an irrevocable trust to take care of your surviving spouse financially, but you want the assets to bypass her estate, it's basically a typical bypass trust, and go to your kids or whoever, you're gonna have HEMS, health, education, maintenance, support. You say, look, my wife is used to freaking flying in jet planes all over the world, wearing the finest jewelry, all that. Of course, that's not my wife. That's Amar's wife, actually. My wife is used to eating beans and noodles. So I'm going to set up where HEMS, health, education, maintenance, support, says she can maintain her current lifestyle within the trust, the guidelines of the trust document. And so the trustee would allow distributions to maintain her health, education, maintenance, and support. It's very liberal in that regard. If I can just real quick, Amar, let's take a break right here for just a second because I want to quiz everybody. All right, so I'm going to ask, who is the most important, and just hang on just a second, person in an irrevocable trust? All right, so I just will quiz everybody real quick, Amar. Make sure they've been paying attention because we didn't say this today, but we have said in previous things. Who is the most important person in an irrevocable trust? There's actually any trust, but in particular an irrevocable one, because once you do it, it can't be revoked. And that's the whole point about it. So hold on just a second, Mar. We got 15-second delay. Do. All right, hold on, Jed. We got one. My man Harry came in. James, Mark, Kenneth. Wow. All right. Oh, Chicken Charlie. What do you think, Snowman? Snowman says, the trustee. Exactly right. So you guys have been paying attention. Gold stars for you who answered trustee. All right. Gotcha. All right, cool. So keep going, Amar.
Yeah, and just to be perfectly clear on that one is that if you're the grantor, while you're living, you can make amendments to the trust, but once you pass, that's one part that cannot be changed. So Now, there are lookbacks when you're making gifts into irrevocable trust, right? So if you have a life insurance policy and do what's called an irrevocable life insurance trust, where you're gifting money to your children to pay for the policy on mom and dad, and then when mom and dad pass, those assets transfer outside of the estate. Well, there's a 3-year look back on most life insurance contracts. So, and from a tax perspective, so if you die within those 3 years, some of those assets could be pulled back into your estate, right, and be taxable. If you're trying to qualify for Medicaid, and you start funding these irrevocable trusts and stuff like that, there's actually a 5-year look back, and this gets really interesting, I guess, in the way to say that it's become a hot item as people age and gift assets to their kids and into this trust to qualify for care, right? So,
and remember, Medicaid is a lot of times the states that run that. So each state will have its own unique provision for their look back. I remember West Virginia, like 10, 15 years ago, it was a 10-year look back. I don't know what it is in other states, but I remember that was a big deal.
Yeah. So how does it work? So basically, it's just like setting up a trust. You know, you go to an attorney. I think there was a question here earlier that what is the least amount that you can put in an irrevocable trust? Well, I mean, there's costs associated, right? So basically, when you set this up, you got to make sure that it's financially beneficial to yourself. Otherwise, what's the point, right? And I would say, like, some of the alternatives to irrevocable trusts, the life insurance or the insurance industry has kind of stepped in to kind of fill smaller balance, it kind of does what the trust is intended, but not really. And so, like, for example, I've seen some life insurance that only have an annuity payout for their beneficiaries. So the beneficiaries can only get a payment over a period of time, which is kind of what you're trying to do with the irrevocable trust. And so I guess there are other solutions beyond just doing this. So
so Chicken Charlie, I'd ask you, what are we trying to accomplish actually? A lot of times if a minimum is what we're trying to do, we're trying to keep our kids from gathering the money because either they could hurt themselves or they might have special needs, if that makes sense. And that's one thing. If we're just trying to avoid probate and that's a living trust, that's not a big winner in my opinion. But we have to dive deeper. Never mind the formation of it and what the financial benefits. What are we exactly trying to accomplish? That's a huge thing because I think trusts get waved around as you can avoid estate tax if you have a trust. No, and then trust gets you can avoid probate if you have a trust. Well, yeah, but it's not pain free. There are other methods to do this stuff as well. And so, what are we trying to accomplish? If it's Medicaid planning, okay, I don't like that, but to each his own. I just think at the end of the day, you got to look at your state. Lots of different things we got to discuss before we just start setting up irrevocable trust for sure.
Yeah, and then are you trying to give an income stream to your kids while they're living?
Exactly.
Or is this at death, right? So there's also a time horizon component to all of this. So there's also special needs trusts and charitable trusts, right? And there's a bunch of other different types of irrevocable trusts. Grantor retained annuity trust. I mean, there's multiple ones here. We're just going to focus on these here as these are the most common. So from estate tax, remember, we're trying to transfer future growth into somebody else's estate, right? So this is a way of freezing the grantor's estate.
Exactly.
Capital gains tax within irrevocable trust.
But what is the question? Oh, okay. Keep going. Okay, keep going.
So capital gains, if it's a defective trust, then the trust is actually, or if it's not a defective trust, then the trust will be paying the capital gains and taxes, right? Not the grantor. If it's intentionally defective, then the grantor could still be paying the capital gains tax there. if you're doing a charitable trust, you can still be getting some of the charitable deduction based off your AGI. But the biggest part of a charitable trust is that if you have an asset that has a lot of gain in it, right? Like concentrated stock. Let's say you bought Apple at $2 a share and now it's worth $1 billion or something large. Then you can transfer that in the charitable trust. The charitable trust can then sell it all, but not have to pay taxes in that one taxable year, right? Like it's based off of the income that they're paying out to the beneficiary. And the percentage of that income is taxed worst to best, meaning you get ordinary income, dividends, taxable interest, then short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains, tax-free income, and then principal, right? So it's based off the distribution.
All right, so we got some questions here, Amar. Let's hold on just a second. We have hold on a second. We talked about the minimum. I saw another one on here. What about spending your money instead of having your wealth grow, as Vinyl says? Yeah, 100%.
That's the number one thing, right? I mean, so remember, you can spend more money to keep your wealth down. That's the number one thing you should probably focus on, right? Instead of adding all these complexities. But some people, no matter how much they'll spend because of habits and, that's just how they are, they're not going to reduce the size of their estate significantly enough, right? Number two is gifting to your children while you're alive, right? Or charities while you're alive would be number three. And then number four would just be paying the taxes and keeping things simple.
That's what I say. So Chicken Charlie says, how are trusts going to be affected by the Biden tax hikes? We don't know enough. There's no legislation right now. I think he's coming out with his proposal today. I tell people this all the time, is that until we see something in committee, it's not even worth talking about. I know it's great YouTube fodder to say, oh my goodness, this, that, and the other, until we have something in committee. And look, at the end of the day, Biden's going to propose and the Senate deposes. I think it's dispose. So the president proposes, the Senate disposes. I can't remember what it's called. But what's happening here, until we see legislation being announced, voted on, and in committee, it's just not worth it because we don't know what's going to be yet. However, with that said, Biden did say yesterday, that we've heard at least, that he's not going to advocate for a reduction in the federal estate tax exemption. So I'm all about that. That's good. That's a good thing. Good thing. So let's keep going here, Amar. Hold on just a second. Amar Shah, that's his name. All right. How important? My man Carl says, how important is a trustee to have healthcare power of attorney? If a relative is a primary trustee to make decisions, is it wise to have an alternate POA to avoid conflict of interest? That's not specific to a irrevocable trust, but you can certainly answer that if you want, Amar.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the people, right? I mean, again, your trustee and your power of attorney for healthcare decisions and stuff like that could be different people.
100%. You're not going to go wrong by having more people, in succession. You know what I'm saying? So I got Charlotte, then I got Chloe, then I got Finney or Pablo, and it's hard to go wrong in that regard. All right. So does a 5-year look back begin at the time requesting access to Medicaid or when the person enters the long-term care? You want to answer that one, Amar?
I actually don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to look that one up. I think
it's the funding of the trust. I mean, so what happens is it has nothing to do with you entering long-term care or requesting Medicaid. Is when were the assets removed from your estate? And so basically, if I say, hey, I'm putting, I got $1 million, I'm going to put it over this irrevocable trust so I can pretend like it doesn't exist. And that way I can qualify for Medicaid, which I don't understand, but let's just be it as it may. What happens is you're going to the state's saying you sign up for Medicaid. Yeah, because I got no money on paper. Look, I'm poor. And they say, wait, we just noticed that you funded a irrevocable trust just last year.
Yeah, so what you're saying is request access to Medicaid is the time that you apply for Medicaid is the 5-year look back from, right?
Yes, 100% right. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my first guess. I mean, that's the more conservative answer, right? And oftentimes I would say that family dynamics will play a role in this Medicaid conversation, because the children may depend upon mom and dad and don't want the assets to be spent down, right? And so that's where I think this could come up. But yeah.
Well, this is a good segue, because this goes into the partnership program. You want to read this one, Amar? What I think it's Kevin asked here, because this is because you are licensed to do long-term care, right?
Yeah. So could I do an irrevocable trust, set aside 5 years of long-term care?
There's a better way than what you're saying here, Kevin. But Amar, you can, if you know, it's fine. I mean, I have a pretty
it's partnership, right? Just have a partnership policies to protect your assets instead of doing an irrevocable trust. So remember, these irrevocable trusts, there are other ways to accomplish the goal that you may have had for yourself, but you don't have to do it through irrevocable trusts and stuff, right? So
and a partnership is a big deal, because this allows you to protect your assets from from the state basically clawing those back because you went into Medicaid. We're not getting too deep. We're not getting into the partnership program here, but long-term care insurance offers something called partnership, which is just for this exact reasoning here right now. So you can say, hey, look, I'm going to protect a certain amount of money from my estate that won't go to the state if I qualify for Medicaid at some point in the future. It's a big deal. All right, so let's see. All right, right here, Amar. How do you make a trust if you want the monies to go on for generations? No to kids, but to grandkids, So here we got a
generation skipping trust. Yeah.
Exactly. Let me leave that up there. So if you want to tackle that, Amar.
Yeah, generation skipping trust. I mean, essentially, you're skipping a generation, and so you would have to work with an attorney to set that up. I mean.
100%. The generation skipping tax is GST, generation skipping trust. You're literally doing what you're saying here, Kim, is you're skipping a generation to make it go to other generations downstream. There is some issues, and I can't remember how those are set up anymore. I just don't remember. Very few people actually do that. Doesn't mean it's not done. It just means at the end of the day, that is, you got some specific estate planning that needs to be addressed in that regard, because it doesn't happen that much. And just some fly-by-night financial advisor says, I can do it. You need a real live attorney who qualifies as an estate planning attorney, because those generation skipping things can become problematic if not done correctly. I just can't remember the ins and outs of them, frankly, just because I've talked about them a couple times. I've never gotten with an attorney to do one ever. And so as you can see, and I've been around for a while, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it doesn't happen that much. Let's see here. Are trusts protected in any way from lawsuits, if you know? Good question.
Yeah, so irrevocable trust, where the beneficiary is not doesn't have control over distributions. So think about it like as a non-discretionary irrevocable trust, would be protected in the sense that that's not your children's assets or your because they don't control those assets. So bankruptcies, lawsuits, divorces, right? That's another one that people like to make sure that the money's going through their bloodline and protect.
It's a big deal. Right here. It's like Amar was saying, it protects it from creditors and predators and in-laws and outlaws, because you actually don't own the money. Your kids actually don't own the money. So if you're you're married to if your daughter's married to some hoodlum and he's out there slinging rocks and stuff like that, they can't sue her because she doesn't have ownership of the money. And that's a benefit of a trust. The irrevocable trust is removed from your estate. You can't be sued for it, and it's removed from your heirs, beneficiaries' estates too. That's just one of the benefits of having these kind of trusts.
Yeah. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So if that trust is distributing assets out to your daughter in that example, those assets could be commingled with, and assumed as community property. It may be subject to a divorce or whatever, but whatever assets are still in the trust are protected, right? Mm-hmm. So most of the times in these discretionary trusts, they're paying out the least amount possible to the child to maintain a certain standard of living.
And that goes back into as well as like, what are we trying to accomplish if we have children that we need to protect or grandchildren that we need to protect, then that's where an irrevocable trust comes in big time. Can we skip forward a little bit to talk about corporate trustees, third-party trustees? Yes, right here.
That's the next part. Yeah.
All right on. Perfect. And we'll get back to some of the questions here in a second, but I want to, this right here, we talk about what's the most important person of trust. Well, if you're trying to do generational trust and things of that nature, like Kim was saying, this is the only solution, in my humble opinion. Go ahead.
You're picking a professional fiduciary or a corporate trustee or somebody that's removed from the family, but that is licensed, that has the knowledge, the ability, and time, and is bounded by your trust document to do what it says in your trust document, so it avoids conflict and emotion, may be the best solution for multiple families. So we provide trustee services through Fidelity and Schwab, and we can serve either as an investment manager or directly as a trustee, right? Depending on what you want. But these corporate trustees,
right? I mean, you can do both. I mean,
yeah. And so one of the things here is administration. So this means like making sure the bills are paid, making sure taxes are filed, making sure the investments are managed, right? So like all the stuff that needs to be done on an ongoing basis. And then also the professional investment management, right? So making sure that the money is invested in a fiduciary manner to make sure that your assets last your lifetime. So, or the trustees, the beneficiaries' lifetime.
I would argue real quick, Amar, that if you're trying to do multiple generations of trust, if you don't have a corporate trustee, I think you're making a horrific mistake. Just because the corporation is not a person, it doesn't have emotions, doesn't have tied to your family dynamics. It is a non-living entity, and as such, it will be there to do whatever you say. And by the way, there is a freaking significant cottage industry of suing beneficiaries, suing trustees, because trustee did not do what the beneficiary felt they should do according to what dad wanted to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this is family dynamics get involved, right? And you could have, siblings start to fight and go against each other. I mean, I've seen it all the time in larger estates where mom and dad wanted.
No, the larger estates, Amar. No, I mean, it literally could just be for the the vacation home that's worth $150,000. It's nuts, man. And
it can get tied in court proceedings and lawyer fees, and really the lawyers are the only ones that win in that case, right? When siblings start fighting because they rack up their fees.
Oh, it's horrible. And then just families are destroyed when you thought you're. The whole thing's nuts. And then, I've just seen it with Mark. If you've been in this business long enough, that's why I say, guys, that if you're a financial planners by default are a paranoid bunch because they've seen things go awry. They're like, man, I didn't expect that, or that sucks. And you're like, all right, so what we got to do is we got to basically build the moat first and foremost before we go start foraging for food, because you got to protect. First, you got to protect before you go on the offense. And, Amar and I have seen a lot of this crap. It's sad, man. Oh, check this out, Amar. James, our man James, which I think James was in Georgia recently, but then went back to Florida to pay higher homeowners insurance fees. He says, my father-in-law put his mom in a nursing home, and they look back 5 years in North Dakota. Okay. So put the mom in the nursing home, look back 5 years, every asset was listed, home, car, and savings. Okay, so basically nursing home for Medicaid, I presume. Yeah. It says that's the clawback. It's bad.
Yeah. And so on this corporate trustees, I mean, so banks are typically what most people use. I would say it's the highest adoption rate because it's easy. I mean, you just list the bank. So like the pros to that is like the bank, long stable bank, if it was 2008 or something like that, where we started seeing banks fail, that could be bad. But the downside to having banks is that banks and trust companies, they'll force the assets into their investments. So if you have, let's say, like we custodian with Fidelity and Schwab, and if mom and dad had Schwab accounts and they listed Fidelity as the trustee on one account or something like that. Well, Fidelity is going to access all those other accounts and move them to Fidelity and have it managed. Or another example is like if you had rental property, right, or real estate. Banks don't manage real estate, and so what banks will do is sell that real estate immediately and have those funds put into an investment account, which could be what you want, or may not be, right? Maybe it's
oil and gas rights. Remember that at USAA, Amar? We had tons of people in Texas, and USA couldn't do anything when it came to oil and gas. So those were left outside the trust. You're like, that doesn't make any sense. Remember that?
Yeah, and then professional fiduciaries can work really well, and those are like in the ideal situation, depending on their fees and whatnot, are probably the best scenario where they're by law have to work as a fiduciary, and they have a set fee schedule, and they can get to know the whole family, and you're dealing with the real human instead of a bank, right?
My man Vinyl says I agree with this. Generally speaking, he doesn't recommend banks. Their trust departments are skilled at moving assets into the bank's revenue stream. And on top of that, what I've found in my career as a banker, the trust representatives were a lot of these irrevocable trusts. If you look deep into the trust document, it's like takes an act of Congress to remove the corporate trustee. Wachovia Bank, for instance, I guess it's Wells Fargo now. And as such, there's no incentive, frankly, because I see. I used to work at First Union Bank, Amar, and I'll just never forget. We had a trustee that come up every once a month, and he's like, whatever, dude. He didn't care. He's like, because the languaging in the trust document did not make it easy to fire the corporate trustee, and as such, there was just no incentive. Kevin, we have a bank and successor corporate trustee. All right, so I want to dive into this a little bit. Just because you think their successor corporate trustee, they can refuse the assignment, Kevin. And I think your name's Kevin. What I mean by that is just because you say your trust, if my wife and my daughter die, I name my bank as corporate successor trustee. They can say, no, we're not accepting this. And don't forget, half the banks don't even know that they're named. Because I just remember this at USAA.
Yeah, because they don't know until they get appointed.
Exactly.
And then they evaluate, should we take on this business or not, right? And so you don't want to be put on that situation. So most of the times, when working with clients that where we're serving as their successor trustee, it's a conversation and an ongoing process. It's not like, I know the risk and what I'm getting myself into beforehand, right? And that's kind of the type of relationship you want with a corporate trustee or a backup, right? So
yeah, and so he said he did talk to the bank. That's good. I just remember my man Kevin, who I'm going to interview as well for this. We worked with him at USA. He was a corporate trustee guy. He said, Josh, I got files upon files upon files at USA naming us as successor trustee. Half these we're not going to take because there's not enough money. There's only like $250,000 in there. We're not going to get involved in that. Take the liability, and so who's the successor trustee? Wasn't no idea, and that's just if USA even got the trust document to begin with. A lot of people name a bank and say you're my successor trustee, and they're like, we don't know that. That's why, like, just going back to Amar, a guy like that, like you can do whatever you want, but I do like instead of a bank, I like a corporate trustee that's an investment firm, an investment manager, an individual person, frankly. James said he went up to Georgia to watch. Here's 13 Boston Terriers. Wow, that must have been fun. He went up to Georgia to watch 13 Boston Terriers. Oh man, you got dogs, Amar, or no?
No, my youngest is still using diapers, so I'm done with poop.
I was going to say because Finney has dumped a lot of logs out there. You're welcome to come in a poop patrol. Fidelity. So James, obviously James is a good guy because he likes us. So he's smart, but I cannot agree with this more. James says that Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab do not bring up what we are bringing up, Amar. And James, one of the things, as much as I can get in the weeds with USAA, they train me better than any other firm I've ever belonged to. And I was at Legg Mason, which became Smith Barney. I was at First Union Bank. the level of training I got at USAA was just nuts, man. It was just nuts. And when you leave there, you're recognizing how poor the industry is in just basic financial planning and estate planning knowledge. And it makes me look smart, makes Amar look smart. And Amar probably is. I'm not the brightest bulb, you know what I'm saying? But I know enough to say, that doesn't make sense what the industry is saying. Let's go down this road instead. It's nuts, man. Did you find the same thing, Amar, at USA? You're like, whoa, this place is rocking.
Yeah, I mean, USA was good from experience and training standpoint, but unless you go outside to get your own education or stuff like that, most of these firms are not providing holistic advice and holistic education to their advisors to provide that advice.
The advisors are then
they're just gathering assets for the firm. That's what they're paid to do.
And and they're on, doing football, fantasy leagues and stuff like that. Well, people like Amar and I are actually looking at the business. And I hate to sound cocky, but I'm just sitting there, all these guys, doing their fantasy football stuff. And I'm like asking about successor trustee. Like, I don't know. I just, whatever the firm says. It's like you're holding yourself as a fiduciary, but you're not. Anyway, it's frustrating.
Yeah. So I'm going to end with this example with the Charitable Remainder Trust for 401k. Because I think this could apply to a lot of people that are charitably inclined and don't want to have their children receive a lump sum. And then I think we should end it there, and then maybe we can answer some questions. You mentioned you had some questions as well, Josh, so we can answer those. And then I do have a hard stop at 19 minutes here or so, 20 minutes.
Yep.
So if you have an IRA and before the Secure Act, you could put it into what's called a Trusteed Ira, where it would guarantee the stretch provisions within an IRA. Or you could tell your children, hey, the best way to take the distributions to take your annual RMD for the rest of your life out of this IRA. Well, you can't do that anymore because a non-spousal beneficiary has 10 years to take distributions out of an IRA, right? So let's think mom and dad, both parents pass away. The children have 10 years to take distributions. Well, they could take it all out in 1 year, or they could stretch it out over 10 years. What this strategy is doing is forcing the beneficiary, your children, to take it out over a set number of years. So you could say 20 years, lifetime, what you predetermine that. But then it doesn't give them the flexibility to take money out all at once or anything else, right? It's kind of locking them into that income stream. So if you're charitably inclined, what you could do is you can set up a charitable remainder trust that gets funded at death. And what you do is the beneficiary of the IRA is now this trust. So upon passing, IRA assets go all into this charitable remainder trust. The assets stay in here. And then in this trust, you have language that talks about distribution. So typically 5%, maybe up to 8% a year will go to your beneficiary, your trust beneficiary. So let's say your children in this case. But let's make it very easy. One child, one IRA, they get 5% a year from that. For the rest of their life, whatever the terms can be. But at minimum, the net present value of this trust has to be greater than 10% going to charity, right? So this is a way where, let's say 90% of the assets flow through to your trust beneficiary, but and 10%, worst case, goes to charity. Most of the time, these numbers are more than that, where you get more than 90% out of your investments in your charitable remainder trust, and more than 10% flow to charity. The one thing here is that, with an IRA, the charitable remainder trust is not paying taxes on that IRA, but when they make distributions to the trust beneficiary, those would be counted as ordinary income, just like they would if they were to take it directly themselves. So if you want to know more, just, I guess, reach out to myself or Josh. But this is a good strategy. If you have, young children or individuals that you want to ensure get a stream of income rather than a lump sum, that you can use this type of strategy for.
All right,
So that's good.
I'm trying to get some. All right. So Scott says, if you want to go on that one, I'm trying to get this out of Finney's mouth. You want to talk about that, Amar?
Yeah, I'm just trying to stop my sharing here.
Wow.
So we're a couple with no descendants. What type of trust would you recommend? Finances. Well, this is why you need to get a trustee, right? Again, you know, if you're 50 and older, you want to find somebody that's 15 years younger than you. You want to find somebody that has the capacity, the ability, the knowledge to manage your estate. A lot of times when we're looking at this is a basic revocable living trust will be the starting place. And then there you can list healthcare directives and power of attorneys and stuff like that. But it really depends on who do you want to receive your money when both of you pass, right? So the revocable trust will take care of who's going to make the medical decisions, who's going to pay the bills. But when both spouses pass, then what do you want to see happen? And that's really when, you know, this irrevocable trust or outright gifting. If you have no descendants, certain times I've seen people just give to charities, right? So they list the charities that they want to give to, and they just do outright distribution. So that
one of the easiest ways is just do a SPIA, a single premium income annuity, Scott, for half the assets, and that way, or 34th of the assets. That way, your wife, assuming she you predecease her, she gets a certain amount of money. She doesn't have to do anything. It just goes right to her check account every month. You know what I'm saying? There's no muss, no fuss in that regard. And then you can say, okay, at the end of my life, I'll leave 25% of the assets, you know, to her via my beneficiary designation, and then you can name a corporate trustee to manage it from there. Lots of different things you can do. You don't need an attorney necessarily, but this is pretty commonplace what you're trying to accomplish there for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So before we get off, Amar, I did a video yesterday on variable annuities, and I said I'm actually more inclined now than in a long time. I'm more inclined now than I was in a long time for variable annuities, just simply because I like the guaranteed minimum income benefit provision with a step up and all that. Now, and my question, and I did not know the answer to this, you are licensed to do annuities. Is that correct?
Yes.
With like they're not commission based, or are they commission based?
Yeah, we have both.
Okay.
So sometimes they have these annuities called IOAs, which is investment only annuities, right? And so like they're not looking for any of these riders or benefits. Those typically tend to be fee-based. Individuals that are looking for these riders and other things tend to be commission-based.
Okay, but either way, you have access, because I don't care about the investment only. I'm caring about the the bells and whistles that go with it, recognizing that you're going to sacrifice some upside. Anyone who buys a variable annuity thinking they're going to get S&P index returns is silly. But you buy the variable annuity to get, that 10%, or I should say 5% guaranteed minimum income benefit, lots of different things in there that you're paying for. But in this day and age of the market, certainly not low, and who knows where we're going to go. I don't know, but if I'm about ready to retire, I'm reconsidering this for sure. And so if it costs you a little bit more money, I frankly, at the end of the day, I just take the issue that is always better to protect the bottom line when you're right about to retire, say 3 years out, 2 years in, than it is to, try to get all the growth as you possibly can. And so a variable annuity, in my opinion, can work like a charm. And so you have all your Jackson and all the regular companies.
Yeah, we work with a broker, like an annuity broker. So we have access to sell like almost every single annuity company that's out there. And if we're not licensed and it's a specific product that a client wants, then we can get licensed with that.
Yeah, I had a guy who I banned from my YouTube channel. He's a retired Merrill guy, and I triggered him once by I can't remember what, but I triggered him once, and he was really upset with me, which I know is doing it good, because if you're a Merrill Lynch guy, but he was not happy with my take on variable annuities, because obviously he thinks they're evil and they're too costly and all this stuff. And I said, yeah. Come back to me in 2000, man, because those people had variable annuities in 2000 with basically a 100% increase on the income benefit base. come 2010, we're a happy campers, unlike you, Merrill Lynch guy, who put all your eggs in one basket and say, just buy the growth stock. So, all right. So right here, would Amar and company want to be the trustee of a trust? They say all assets get distributed to charities, but allows for fees to be paid to the trustee.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best type of position to be in, right? Like as a trustee, the more black and white and clear it is, the easier it is to serve as trustee.
100%.
Like the trust where we typically say or have some pushback is that I want you to maintain my children's standard of living. And so how do you define that? Like what type of car do they have? Do they have a Honda Accord and now that their car breaks down, they need a new car and we have to make a judgment call, right? Because there's, based off that, no, you can't get a Ferrari, but, maybe a Nissan or something.
Right, because their standard of living might be different than what your standard of living for your kids was. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And so the ones that are more black and white, where it's like, hey, you just need to make sure you distribute to these charities at this time. Those are the more ideal trust relationships that we serve in. The other thing that we do, like with charities, is that for larger estates that are distributing a huge chunk to certain charities, they may not want to give all those assets all at once to those charities, or they may want some checks and balances where the charities have to perform on certain metrics. And if we know those metrics, then we can work with the charity to kind of have that annual review process to release funds as well.
So when you're leaving money to Black Lives Matter and they go buy a house in where the lady buys a place in Los Angeles, Amar, you might want to say, I don't want to give that money to charity anymore. Yeah. How do you make a trust such as your wife or husband dies and the other has dementia and kids are not available, so your monies don't get managed by a state appointed person? Did I say that right? Yeah, absolutely. So you want to talk about
you have to appoint a trustee, right? Like so you don't want your children as trustee. It seems like based off this question, you'd probably want a third party that you trust, like a family member or friend, to serve as trustee, or you're going to need to get a professional fiduciary.
Kim, it's literally that simple. You got to find out, you're going to have to get a trust set up in this regard, because there's a lot going on and a lot of people we want to make sure do not take ownership simply because they don't have the capacity. So anytime, this is what I say all the time, make it simple. You say, okay, if I leave it to Charlotte, who's smarter than me and looks a lot better, she's going to be just fine. However, if Charlotte has dementia, I can't leave it to her because she doesn't know what the hell she's doing, if that makes sense. But I have assets. So how do I make sure Charlotte's taken care of and yet she doesn't manage the assets? Well, the only way to do that is through a trust. There's no other way around that. And that's a trustee that has to get involved, something like Amar, or it could be, your Uncle Bob, but we don't necessarily like that because we want someone younger, generally speaking. But you got to think about that. Who can get involved here and manage this to take care of my loved ones, but also make sure my loved ones don't take ownership and they get squander it however they want to do it. It's a big flipping deal. And this is why I tell people all the time, when you're doing your estate documents, LegalZoom's fine, but at the end of the day, man, the real benefit about a real life living person is that they can say, okay, so what happens? What happens? What happens? Difference between community property and common law property. Does LegalZoom, will they educate you on that? I guarantee they won't. And so we got lots of different things going on, and just it's such a big deal that instead of paying attention to Exxon stock versus Tesla, maybe back up. Now, I'm not saying for you, Kim, but back up and look at the real things that matter. The real things that matter are who gets what and how and what risks are there from a taxation perspective. Exxon versus Tesla stock, who gives a flying what? When it comes down to it, it's your estate. Who do we want to make sure benefits and who do we want to make sure doesn't get jeopardized by having these assets flow through? It's a big deal. That's why I'm passionate about it, because a lot of people pay no mind to it because they're so busy. Oh my goodness. Actually, Amar, did you hear about the guy DeVoe today? Some big value investment guy. He jumped off one of the buildings in Manhattan, killed himself.
Yeah. There was something I read. Was it today? I didn't hear it today. I thought a couple of days ago there was somebody else, maybe I forgot. It's
James asked, what variable annuity do you recommend? We can't do that on here, James. Just FYI. No way.
Depends on your situation and all sorts of other variables.
What gets you, let's see, how do you vet a qualified financial fiduciary to handle your trust? Is there a grading system to compare that's available online? No.
But most professional fiduciaries will have like a website and like all the like the transparency should be number one, right? Like so, like they should be transparent with their fees, what they can do, what they can't do, and a bunch of other pieces there that you'll want to know. And then the second thing that you will find is that you could go to, like, I think it's a state website, and you can find professional fiduciaries that are in your area, and you can there's like a database of them, and then you can interview 2 or 3, and then kind of get a feeling from those that you interview that you feel comfortable with.
So we'll get Amar to get out here in just a second. But James, look, you said my dogs wore you out. Well, apparently they wore themselves out, because there's Finney and there's Pablo. They're dead to rights, as you can see. People say, Josh, you look so much older since your old videos. I said, yeah, because I got 2 dogs now. Man, goodness, they wear me out. Mafia. So Pulverizer says the Mafia threw that cat off the whatever building he got thrown off of. So I don't know that to be true, but that's of interest. Just don't kill yourself over investments, my friends. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to do that, which is why you never take leverage, by the way, because the only time you go bankrupt is when you have debt. So we'll let you get out of here, Amar. You got bigger and better things to do. Any last thoughts, questions, comments, concerns for us?
No, just if you've gotten this far, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Client First Capital Learning. And if you have any questions or concerns or topics that we can talk about, then we're going to continue these, right, Josh, on Wednesdays. So
absolutely, every Wednesday.
So look for some ideas to kind
we'd love to have ideas, 100%. Yeah. So if y'all can put in the comments, ideas that you want us to talk about. We got our own methodology here, but that's, if you guys don't give a crap, we want to hear what you guys want to hear. So let us know. James says he can get you a Boston Terrier. He says, free for me, Niet, as my king. What's his name? Putin would tell me to say Niet, because I got enough of my own dogs. On top of that, I still got kids. In fact, Chloe's back there right now. Yeah. I got to make sure she does her homework. Right. Amar. Oh, Jeremy says he's your biggest fan.
Cool.
Jeremy, Amar's already taken. Oh, right here, Amar. Talk Tesla and you'll hit 1,000 subs super fast. 100%.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Don't do it, man. It's a long-term game. You want to play the long term. All right. See you guys. Thanks. See you, Amar. Good boys.